We're part of the Fired Up Sports Network of shows. Please check out other Fired Up Sports Network podcasts like the P-Lot Pod, Water Cooler Talk, Bell Smashers, Philly Sports Love and Pain, Drunk on Broad, Beer Battered Sports, and the Fired Up Sports Show, which are available on all major podcasting hosting sites and social media. Also, check out Mark Ramos' Roundup on firedupsports.com, which breaks down the happenings going on with all your favorite local teams.
The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions.
Eagles! Swinging a miss, struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Flyers are going to win the Stanley Cup. The Flyers win the Stanley Cup. For the lead. Yes! Iverson, wow, what a fake off Daniels as he broke his ankles and got all the way to the cup.
Well, welcome in. It's Drunk on the Court, episode 197. But Mark, it's been a minute, right? It's been a couple weeks since the last we talked, but a lot to recap, right? The exciting, play-in, the 7-8 play-in game with the Heat, and now the epic start to this Knicks series with the way that those couple games played out. Games 1 and 2, the way they played out at Madison Square Garden, especially game 2. Yeah. And that whole scenario, as I would prefer not to speak about it, that to me feels like the he who shall not be named conversation. And then, you get the Embiid news that comes out, the Embiid game in game 3. Just an exciting start to this playoffs. And, you're getting, everything you want to get out of your star players, the way that this, playoff run has started. And hopefully there's a lot more to come, but it's been an exciting way to start this playoff run. Talk to me about where you are. Let's start with the play-in game, because the play-in game was, the game with the Heat, which was a back and forth. As some people would like to refer it, I'm sure we'll remember it as it'll either be remembered as the Nick Batum game or the game that was saved by Chick-fil-A.
Yeah. I mean, the Miami Heat are, and we're seeing it again, right? In this matchup, they have the Celtics in round 1, and just, the more this stuff happens with them, it's like the more you can really like drive home the Heat culture aspect of it. Because this team, it doesn't matter where they end up. It doesn't matter where they seed. It just seems like, oh, you're going to get like a tough effort. And that play-in game with the Sixers was exactly that. Like that was a really nip tuck kind of game. And that's just who they are. That's how they play. And I think for me, I'll remember it as the Nico Batum game. And this is why, you add quality vet depth like that for a game like that, because those guys will come through. They know what it's like to hit big shots. They know what it's like to have the ball in their hands in those big moments. And the Sixers need that, especially if they're going to play deep into the postseason.
And it's interesting to see that, like, the news that came out that I heard this week is the story about that trade from the Clippers, and that he was one of the integral parts that they were like, no, he's got to be included in that. To know, for Daryl Morey to know kind of ahead of time that at some point in this run, if they're gonna be successful, they're gonna need contributions from guys that are gonna be vet guys that have been playoff tested, that know what those moments are like, that are not gonna kind of shy away from them. And you saw him just kind of shine. He in that game, in 20, he plays 28 minutes, which is well above the average for what he would be playing, right? And puts up 20 points and 5 rebounds, and shows up, really, really big in those games. He's your second leading scorer in that game, next to Embiid with 23. And they needed all 20 of those points. They needed there were really, really big shots that he made. Coming down the wing, those wing threes that like were just daggers.
Yeah.
Like it was, but the Heat culture is real. And it's real when you think about the amount of times that people say that's a team that you just don't want to run into in the playoffs.
Yeah.
That's a team that's always going to give. It doesn't matter who's on that team, right? Like you look at this series now where the Heat are playing, they go up and they're giving Boston every bit of what they want, like what they don't want to see. And, they go and they take a game. They take a game against Boston without Jimmy Butler.
Right.
It really does speak to, and I heard someone talk, I heard Tim Legger talking about, there was like a players kind of survey about coaches they would want to play for that weren't their coach. And Spoelstra was like top of the list.
Right.
It really just does. It's not a surprise why he gets what he gets out of guys. I mean, and you think about who he studied under, right? He's getting that guidance from Pat Riley. He's getting that guidance. He's got, Alonzo Mourning in that front office. Like he's got guidance there, but he has really established himself as, the premier NBA coach, especially in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, remember, I mean, for a long time, right, it was Pop was in that mantle of like, it doesn't matter what we'll give him, he'll get the absolute most out of this. Spoelstra's such a great X's and O's tactical guy. Like, I don't think
Really
he ever
is.
gets enough credit for that. Especially, remember, I mean, early on in his career, people looked at him when, they had the big three in Miami and things like that. People looked at him almost as if he was like the weak link of that whole situation at times, him and like Bosch and stuff, towards the end. But
wow.
Yeah, like, I mean, to look at what he's done with Miami Heat teams since those days, and I mean, it really speaks to how great of a coach he is. And in a series like that, right, I don't think anybody would argue that like a team like Boston, for example, has way more talent up and down their lineup. But when you look at the coaching, and you're going to evaluate the coaching, and you look at a coach like a young guy with not a lot of experience in Joe Mazzulla versus, Eric Spoelstra, who's battle tested, knows what this is like, has won before. It's like the scales couldn't be tipped in his, like, you walk in with an advantage if he's on your bench. If he's like the leader of your bench, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it really is. And, the hard part for me right now is looking at you're getting epic contributions from Maxey and from Embiid.
Yeah.
It's all the other guys. All the other guys that we've kind of, sprinkled in and talked about throughout the season have really been disappointing in terms of their output. And I'm just pulling up like the box score from this game against the Heat, right? Yeah. And you look at a guy that we've talked about a lot, right? Tobias Harris, 33 minutes, 9 points.
Yeah.
You talk about, a guy that they traded for mid-season, right? Buddy Hield, 18 minutes, 7 points. Yeah. Right? And you saw the effect of that in games 1 and 2 against the Knicks.
Yeah.
You saw how much that, it didn't matter. If we start with game 1, right? You look at Tobias Harris' stat line, 31 minutes, 7 points. Buddy Hield, 11 minutes, 0 points. Like,
yeah,
it's not a wonder if you would have gotten even just the slightest contribution from either one of those guys, you've probably won all 3 games.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because all
The,
three of these games were within, like, obviously they win game 3, right?
Mhm.
But the games 1 and 2, they were within earshot of both of those games in Madison Square Garden. And yeah, I think Tobias Harris, like, it's almost like he's like allergic to the bunny. Like he gets within that, like, that little line between,
drives me
like,
crazy.
right around the basket.
Yeah.
The shot chart is like wild. He misses so many shots within 5 feet of the hoop.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating. And I'm pretty sure in game 1, there were a couple times where he missed those in big spots too. There were times where, like, you could close the gap within. There were a couple of times I remember where that you could have closed the gap to within 1 possession, and he misses the bunny, and the Knicks go down and hit a 3, and all of a sudden a game that could have been within 1 point is now 6. It's
Yeah.
like that huge possession swing where every possession in a playoff series is so amplified that, like, it's just so frustrating.
Yeah.
So frustrating.
I think, we've talked about Tobias a lot on this show, and you mentioned those, like, those short range, like, middies. I mean, the thing that bothers me, I think, the most about that is, like, when they're short, he often, like, leaves them short, like they'll kiss the front of the rim, and I'm just like, you can give it a little bit of, like, you know what I mean? On those shots.
He's got to take some pointers from Isaiah Hartenstein, who
Oh.
has, like, has perfected this push shot that looks so fucking ugly.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it goes in every goddamn time.
I was like, I actually, it's funny you said that, because I was actually texting my cousin and a buddy of ours during that are big hoops fans, and they listen to this show and stuff. And I like, we were texting about it during it, and it was funny that you said that, because I actually said, after, maybe it was during game 2 or might have even been game 1, I don't remember, but I was just like, I'm so tired of Hartenstein's baby hook here just going in just every. But I mean, he's really done, like, I mean, like, it really must be something he works on, because I mean, like you said, I mean, mechanically, it's like, it's not pretty at all, but it goes in every time.
In every time.
Yeah.
And, like, and again, they happen at the worst times for the Sixers, because there are always times where, like, the part that has been really frustrating, especially in game 1, right? You remember in game 1, the disparity in second chance possessions, the rebounding was, well, I don't even know how to say this. It was dramatically in favor of the Knicks, right? You had total rebounds. You get out rebounded 55-33.
Yeah.
You're not going to, and here's the thing, Mark, it was still within reach.
Right.
You got out rebounded by that much, and you were still within 7 points.
Right.
Like, the part that was hard, right, is you look at the offensive rebounds, right? They got 23 offensive rebounds. So there was 23 second chance opportunities to the Sixers 9.
Yeah.
Like
That,
and there were so many times where they got those offensive rebounds, they extend the possession, and without fail, I don't have that stat in front of me, but, like, I would love to see how many of those offensive rebounds turned into second chance points.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that was really, I think, that was a really key storyline, especially in games 1 and 2. Maybe if you look at the raw numbers, you don't think it's that bad or whatever, but I mean, like, the amount of, like defensive rebounds and things like that, the Sixers just, it looked like a fundamental issue. Like, I mean, like, and maybe it was like, I hate to go there with it, but sometimes it's like, sometimes rebounding really is about effort. It's about,
Yeah.
you
Oh
know,
yeah.
not just positioning and things like that. There is an art to it. I'm not trying to minimize that, but sometimes it's about like, you saw the Knicks like they're like in games
Like
1 and games 2, they came out with like some vigor in those games. And I don't know if it's being, having them court or whatever, but they were really, really like, they were juiced up for those games. And it felt like at times the Sixers couldn't match the intensity, and that can
yeah. I mean,
happen.
you look at where they that was like. I mean, it was typical Tom Thibodeau team,
Sure.
right?
Mhm.
That like you get the team to be physically aggressive. You crash they crash the boards like old school, like 19, like mid 90s NBA. Like
Yeah.
send everybody to the basket and try to get as many possessions as you can. Where
Yeah.
like this new age is like, no, like send a couple guys, everybody else go down and get back on defense because you're trying to defend the next possession.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're like, fuck it, we're just going to get every rebound we possibly can. And it really did translate into, you know, the the dramatic effect that it had on the outcome of the game, because
Right.
there were so many times in that game 1 where they just got they got those like those back-breaking buckets where they just killed you. And it was like as soon as you got within earshot of them, there were like a couple of three, like the Josh Hart threes, the
Mhm.
DiVincenzo threes, they were killers because
Yeah.
they happened at the worst times when you were just getting close enough to be within earshot to make them sweat. And they were like, boom. And it went, possessions went from like, you got it within 4. Now it's, 10. Now
Yeah.
it's 11. Now it's 9. And they never let you get close. And, when you talk about the fouls, right, there were the officiating in this game, in not only in this game, but in this series across the board has been really suspect and really inconsistent.
Yeah.
And you've seen that in, and we can, is there any other part of game 1 you want to touch on? Because game 2
Um,
had all the drama loaded into the back end of that game.
yeah, I mean, this is more of an overarching point, and I'm sure I'll reiterate this throughout as we go through the games. But I mean, like for a team that has players like Embiid and Maxey, and like you're getting what you're getting from those guys,
Mhm.
um, and the Sixers, as they've kind of done all year long, it's kind of been like a sum of their parts thing. It's been a lot about the depth. Even though we're big fans here, I mean, like we mentioned Tobias Harris, I mean, Kelly Oubre Jr., I mean, has had a very sporadic,
Yeah. I
he's
mean,
had some tough games in this series.
he played
Um,
39 minutes in that game 1 and only scored 10 points.
yeah, and
And
there was a
and,
lot
and
of,
when you look at the contributions from the Knicks role players
right, Deuce McBride. I
compared to the
mean,
Sixers, right? If you look at the contributions from the guys that they are the guys that are coming off their bench and the guys that are they're secondary scorers,
yeah,
right? When you talk about guys, I'm trying to pull it up. Like, all right, so a guy like Miles McBride, Bogdanovich, you've gotten, like, you look at this game 1, right? Miles McBride gets 21 points in 28 minutes.
they haven't been able to
Bogdanovich comes
stop him.
off the bench, and right, like but in turn, right, you look at guys that filled those roles for the Sixers, and you
Yeah,
look at Kelly Oubre and Buddy Hield and and Nick Batum, and in that game, those 3 combined for 13 points.
yeah, yeah,
Like, you're not going to win playoff games that way. You need the contributions from the guys, because the numbers from Maxey and Embiid have been great.
yeah, yeah. You can't really complain about that at all. And as we kind of like, a good kind of segue into game 2. I mean, like,
Mhm.
I mean, those guys have been not even just like considering what they've gone through, both of them. I mean, Maxey was sick for game 2. I mean, it's just,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
can't ask for anything more than from these guys, from
no,
the
I
two of
mean,
them.
to look at game 2, right, and just to start with the box score, right? Again, right? Tobias plays 41 minutes
Yeah.
and gets 10 points.
Yep.
Buddy Hield only gets 15 minutes and 2 points. Batum has 33 minutes, but 6 points.
Yeah.
Like, and Kelly Oubre, 26 points, 4 minutes, or 26 minutes, 4 points.
Right.
You know, you now this is the monster game from Maxey, right? Maxey
Uh-huh.
gets 35 points. He's lights out. He's a rebound away from a triple double. You know,
Yeah.
Embiid is 34, 10, and 6. You're
Yeah.
getting what you get out of stars,
Mhm.
but it's just not enough.
Right. You mentioned the officiating in this series, and
Mm.
I'm not gonna sit here and say that these guys, these guys have been good or anything like that. These officiating crews. I mean, I think it's a league wide. I mean, LeBron was talking about it post, a Lakers game, and he
Yeah.
actually referenced the Sixers and the Knicks.
Which is wild.
Yeah, it is wild, and but my thing with the officiating and stuff like that, I think we've leaned, and maybe even the Sixers have leaned a little bit too much into we're not getting, you don't lose. Did it compound the issue? Sure, it did
Mhm.
in game 2, the officiating. But as we had said just a moment ago, the referees ain't stopping 4 Sixers around the rim and Hartenstein flying in, grabbing a rebound.
No, not at
That's
all.
not officiating. You know what I
Nope.
mean? The wide
even
open,
close.
uncontested shots from beyond the arc that you can't give these guys. Hart and DiVincenzo and McBride, like that isn't officiating. That's on you guys. That's on
100%.
execution and things like that. You can't have breakdowns like that in the postseason, because as we've said, everything's magnified. But beyond that, it's just like, it feels like, and I think that's what's frustrating for people in that game too, is like, it feels like an effort thing. It feels like you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
and I don't know if it is or not. I'm not trying to question anybody's toughness or anything like that, but it's just like, when you're watching at home and you got guys standing around just looking at the rim as the ball's going up,
Mhm.
and nobody comes down with it, and we have a 4-to-1 ratio in our favor, and we're not coming up with
Mhm.
the basketball. Those things can't happen in the postseason, and you can't
No.
afford to give games like that away. When, if you win game 2, right, this is a legacy game for Tyrese Maxey. We're looking back at that. Not only did the Sixers win, but under the weather Maxey gives us like his best Jordan-esque postseason performance.
Seriously.
And
And all of that goes away, right? With the way that, like, you basically took care of business for 47 minutes and 30 seconds.
yeah,
And in those last 30 seconds, you give away that 5-point lead on, like the epic of most epic collapses.
yeah,
And and not for nothing, right? I think we would be remiss if we didn't point out and didn't acknowledge the fact that, like, there were a lot of things that were questionable that happened in that last stretch, right? And
right.
there's no use crying over spilled milk, but we do have to acknowledge what we
Mhm.
see, right? On this screenshot, right? You clearly see now, at this point, let me be transparent. Kyle Lowry, the vet that he is, needs to make the call to call the timeout before even inbounding the ball. Right? You call the timeout, you advance the ball to half court. You can run the play that they've run now at the end of games now a couple times, where you basically just give the ball to Tyrese Maxey way in the backcourt and you let him drive.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, the official's job is to be aware of the circumstances and aware of the game situation,
Mhm.
and be looking for these things, right?
Right.
There's 3 officials on the floor. One of them should be looking at the coach,
Mhm.
looking at any of the integral parts that would contribute to a timeout at that point, right?
Right.
Kyle Lowry in this screenshot still has the ball.
Mhm.
So he's still got possession of the ball, and you clearly see Nick Nurse acknowledging a timeout.
Yeah.
That doesn't get called.
Right.
Not that it does anything for us now, but it's important to acknowledge the fact that that's kind of what happened now,
Right. Sure.
right? So also, right, this is Drew Hanlon, right? And Drew Hanlon clearly has a horse or horses in this race, right? Because he does clearly work with Tyrese Maxey and with Joel Embiid very closely. This is a screenshot from as that ball is being inbounded, right?
Mhm.
Clearly, his jersey is being held, which
Right.
would restrict his ability to be able to obtain possession of the ball.
Yeah.
That doesn't get called. And here you see another screenshot of Tyrese Maxey clearly obtaining possession of the ball,
Yeah.
again with Nick Nurse trying to attempt to call a timeout. And all three of those things happen within a span of, I don't know, Mark,
40 seconds.
right? Like not even, right?
Yeah.
Like you're talking about maybe less than 20 seconds between the
Right.
time that he inbounds the ball. Those things don't get called, and it clearly affects the trajectory of the game,
Sure.
right? Because he goes to the ground, he doesn't get the timeout, the ball is ripped out of his hands. DiVincenzo misses the initial attempt. Now,
Right.
this is where I think we go right to what you were talking about before
Sure.
this. This is that at that point, that's an effort play.
Right.
You cannot, in that moment, not let Isaiah Hartenstein get the rebound and kick it back out. That's on you. That's an effort play to be able to, right? Because at that point, right, it should have been a foul multiple times. They should have had the timeout. That aside, everything from that point on is a basketball play.
Right. Yeah.
And you didn't box out. You didn't get the rebound. They kick it back out and they hit the three.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It really is a frustrating situation to say that could have, right, dramatically affected the series, right? Because then they come back 1-1. And and we obviously know what we'll talk about game 3 in a second, but like it's just it's incredibly frustrating. Now, this last screenshot is gonna kind of feed into what you were talking about.
Mhm.
Right? There's no excuse. Right?
No.
In this image that we are that under the basket screenshot, right? You have Isaiah Hartenstein in the middle on that little half line right around the hoop.
Yeah.
And in this screenshot, you can see Kyle Lowry, Joel Embiid, Nick Batum, and what I believe is Tobias Harris.
Yeah.
So you've got 4 of your guys in that area. Not a single one is in between Hartenstein and the basket.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why you didn't get the rebound. That's why it didn't get kicked back out. That's why it got kicked back out. And that's why DiVincenzo had the opportunity to be able to have a 3. And because everybody was crashing the boards, nobody's there to contest that shot.
Right.
And the game ends the way that it does. It ends on a very, now the Sixers do get possession. It was a very lackluster, not impressive attempt at a last shot, but
Yeah.
really disappointed at the way that game ends.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for admitting all of that into evidence here. We're gonna take that in and make our.
Can you talk to me, Mark, about the official end game 2-minute review process that, like, I don't understand what the point is. I don't because nothing is going to happen from that. They are not going to admit that something went wrong.
Right.
They're not going to admit that they do admit that there were fouls that should have been called that weren't, but then nothing happens.
Right.
Like, yes, the Sixers admit that into evidence or whatever, and they admit it for like, but then nothing happens. And you heard a lot of talking heads in the NBA talk about it. Like, why are we even doing that?
Right.
Why are we acknowledging that our officials are not getting these right? Why do we, and to go back to the LeBron thing, right? Why do we have the replay center if we're using it and we're not getting these calls right?
Right. Right. And I mean, that's a really, like, LeBron really, it's an apt point. I don't understand the, like, number one, I mean, like, you're really not doing, you're doing your own officials a disservice by
Mhm.
making that knowledge, like, making that information public. But then when it affects the games and things like that, like, all it's telling us is that the referees they're just not getting the calls. I have a much bigger issue with the missed timeout than I do the, like, you know,
Mm.
the horse collar tackle on Maxi, you know what I mean? The drop step
Right?
tackle on Maxi, mostly because, like, the beginning of that play, both sides have done it. I'm not saying that it's one or the
Mhm.
other, one's better than the other. But I mean, I've seen that play a bunch of times since game 2 in its entirety. And I mean, Maxi does get off a pretty good shove on Josh Hart, and that wasn't
Yeah.
called. And I'm fine with that. It's a playoff game. Emotions are high. You want to let them play. That's I'm cool. I'm fine with that. I don't have real issues with that.
Mhm.
Watching Nick Nurse from multiple angles over the last for a 15, 20-second period here with the tee
Mhm.
up. Hey, timeout. This is a universal sign. Okay.
Right?
Universal sign in sports for timeout. Nobody gets it. Nobody gets it. There's more than
Not a
one
single
official
person
on the
saw
field.
that.
What?
Not a single person saw that.
Oh yeah, not
Like,
a single person sees it. And that's inexcusable. That part just
mhm.
I don't understand that part, and eh, I don't know why. It's a good question, and I don't know what the league's answer to it is, other than the fact that you really, really drive home the fact with your officiating crews that you call this nip and tuck, and that you
Mhm.
make sure that every I is dotted and every T is crossed, and make sure that you see the T's when
Yeah.
they're out there.
Listen, Mark, I don't care if it makes as much as it would drive our spouses nuts. I don't care if it takes the last 2 minutes of the game. It makes the last 2 minutes of the game 37 minutes long.
Right.
If you get the calls right, like if you do what you do in some of the other sports where you take that replay ability out of the hands of the team
Right.
and you just go to anything that's indisputable gets reviewed
Right.
just to make sure that the game is right. Like the hard part for me now is that we have the technology available to be able to get these things right. And the people
Sure.
at home can see that these things are right or wrong.
Mhm.
And now that we have access to all these camera angles and all this information and all this technology,
Mhm.
but yet we're still not utilizing it the way that it could be so that we're getting the calls right.
Yeah.
And
When you're
like
at
that,
home, yeah, when you're at home and you're watching a game and you see the same play for 7 or 8 angles,
mhm,
with the technology and the cameramen and the work that they do to be able to catch all this from multiple angles. I mean, like, the whole, human element part of it, kind of, that falls on deaf ears when, as you
mhm,
said, you're at home and you can see this from multiple angles. The NBA would probably benefit, especially because those last minute and under a minute plays are so, like, in all games, are so
mhm.
frantic. I mean, they would probably benefit from, like, an NFL style, like, hey, anything under 2 minutes is reviewable. Like,
It would
you
only make
know, mhm,
right. Like it's like that. That's the part that just drives me nuts because it really does change the trajectory of the series. Right. There's a huge disparity
mhm,
between a series that's tied at 1-1 and a series that's 2-0 in favor of one team.
Yeah.
I know that it kind of sounds like I'm a little like crying in my Cheerios here, but like I'm just in favor of getting it right. Like
Yeah.
just get it right makes like if this were happening in reverse,
Mhm.
I'd probably have a very different feeling. I'd
Yeah.
probably be singing a different tune.
Sure.
But like that, there's me being a homer, right? Like
Yeah.
but at the same time, I understand the importance of getting it right. Just
Yeah.
get it right.
Yeah.
Like, and so the series comes back to Philly, 2-0 Knicks. Right. And then you get game 3.
Yeah.
And game 3, we don't find out until after the game what Embiid is actually dealing with. That
Right.
in the midst of games 2 and 3, that he starts to experience symptoms of what we later find out from Woj is Bell's palsy, which is a nerve disorder where the nerves in your face essentially just stop functioning for periods of time.
Yeah.
And the fact that we find out that that's why he's kind of wearing the sunglasses, he's kind of like removed himself from a little bit of the public light.
Right.
And that he goes out in 41 minutes and scores 50 points, 50 points, 8 rebounds, and 4 assists.
Yeah.
He was electric. He was incredible to see. The way that he carried this team, especially in the third quarter.
Mhm.
Talk about him for a minute, because I'm going to pull up some stats.
Yeah, we have
that are
plenty.
probably going to blow some people's minds.
Yeah, I mean, what more can we say that we've gushed over Joel's game this year?
Mm,
And for him to come through and to know in post what he was going through,
hmm
and I can only imagine the discomfort, in a situation like that, and to come through and hit those big shots. He was doing it all over the floor, mid-range game, threes, contested threes, I mean, he was on one, and he deserves, all of the credit. And if the Sixers do win this series, Embiid and no one can say that Embiid and Maxey weren't the driving force for this team. In this series, if they continue, there's a lot of road left here, but at the same time,
Yeah.
Through 3 games, I mean, they really, really deserve a lot of credit for how well they've played. And, to know that Joel's been less than 100%, and we already knew that, but then to know that, dealing with that, I mean, I can only imagine how difficult that was and how uncomfortable it was.
It really, I mean, Mark, I think it might be an understatement to say that, a lot of us a lot of people in our generation identified their fandom at the beginning with Allen Iverson.
Yeah.
I think you might, by the time his career is over, the conversation between who's the best Sixer ever is really going to be the way that Joel Embiid is playing. That gap is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger because of how impressive he is, right? And here's the first stat I'm going to throw at you, Mark. Centers with 50 points in a playoff game. Joel Embiid is one of 3.
Yeah.
Wilt Chamberlain did it 4 times. Jokic did it. Jokic had 53 last year.
Yeah.
And then Embiid had 50, right? But in the game 3, right? 68% from the field, 71% from 3, 90% from the free throw line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's all. I mean, like, that's, you want to talk about when you're almost shooting 70%, that's more than just a heat check. You know what I mean?
It's true.
You got the flammable suit on,
Ooh.
you're on fire.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, listen, he's got 440 field goals in the playoffs.
Yeah.
He's got 443 free throws.
Yeah.
Just he really just does an incredible job. He's a guy that we just talked about. He's one of only 2 Sixers with 50 points and 5+ threes. It's him and Iverson, and that's
Yeah.
it, right? And talk about the disparity, right? Put them side by side, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about a guy who's plus 7 feet, and a guy who's 6 feet if he's lucky.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like to see the way that they've done this and the way that they've kind of just rallied around him, and to see how at every moment he's really just elevating his game to the next level. Like we said, Mark, we've said this on previous shows. It would only happen this way where it would be epically difficult. They would make it as epically difficult as humanly possible, right? We saw that at the end of the season, when we watched them slide when Embiid got injured. They were at the 2 seed. We watched them slide all the way to the 7th seed. We watched them struggle and struggle and struggle. What I saw out of this team in terms of their effort and their fight, they got contributions from guys up and down the bench, right? You got 15 from Oubre. You got 11 from Campaign. Talk about Campaign, because he came in, and the post-game quote about the effort was everything he needed to embed his legacy.
Yeah. It would be remiss to not talk about Cam and his effort. I think he played a really, really pivotal role in just kind of getting the beginning of that game game 3 was tough. I mean, there was a lot of, and B ended up with a flagrant. There was all kinds of, which, I should say too, like with the pull aparts with the Knicks and the Sixers and things like that. Embiid pulls Mitchell Robinson down when he's on the ground there in that one play. Probably wouldn't have liked that if roles were reversed, but at the same time, I don't mind the physicality. This is Sixers Knicks, right? We haven't seen each other in the postseason since Sir Charles was with the Sixers. You know what I mean? Like we've had it's been a long time coming. So it's Sixers Knicks. I don't mind the physicality at all.
Not at all.
I actually have the Campaign quote up here from NBC Sports, and I was going to read it out just so for people who didn't hear it. This is from Campaign after his game. And he said, sometimes a lot of the bench guys, that's our job, to keep giving guys confidence. Keep showing love to the guys that's out there playing, because you never know when you might be out there and you want that energy back. You want that. It brings confidence to the team. And it's so apt because that's exactly what he did. That game, it looked like at times the Sixers' emotions were getting maybe the best of them. And Cam comes off the bench. He hits the back-to-back triples, turns around to the crowd, throws up the 3 to let everybody know that it was a triple. And I think he has a block in there. And
that's right.
Yeah. And that was a really, we love guys for that in Philadelphia. I think all cities really rally around guys like that. But in Philadelphia, it's really it means a little bit more to see somebody like a player like Campaign do something like that and kind of get the game back on track for the Sixers, because then guys started contributing. I think Kelly hit a tough layup after that, and he throws the flex up, he throws the muscles up, and and the guys started they started to look comfortable in that game. And then here come Maxey and Embiid, and they bring it to the finish line, for the rest of the way from the second quarter on. And, that was a really, really inspired effort and really fun to watch. And that was a game that they obviously needed, so that was awesome. That was awesome to see Campaign contribute in that way and give you a little bit of everything. And that's exactly what you want from a guy in his role, hit a couple tough shots, make a play, have an impact on the game in some respect. And that's exactly what Camp did. So
Yeah.
that was awesome.
To see the way, like, this is what you need in roles, in guys that are in roles like that. They to understand that role and then to excel in that role is huge. We'd be remiss if before we jump out of here, right? The importance of Game 4, and the importance of closing the gap and making this a 3-game series. The importance of taking Game 4 at home. You need more of what you got in Game 3. You
Yes.
need the effort and the energy. The thing that I'm going to call out, though, is the amount of noise that came in that arena when there were plays for the Knicks. Like, Philly, we got to be better.
Yeah.
I don't know who or how they're getting as many tickets as they are, but like, that has to be a sellout. Like, your sell out your soul to be able to be in that building. And like, there's no way that in a playoff game, I know that the Knicks are geographically close, and I know a lot of people can get down here really easily.
Yeah.
But like, good God, people, like, we cannot have a playoff game where it's as loud as it is for the opposing team. I don't care who it is. And I'm looking at another, it obviously, it doesn't have to be another 50-point performance, but like, it needs to be another, you're going to need to continue to get what you're getting out of Maxey and Embiid. And you're going to need those role guys to step up at some point. To me, like, it doesn't matter if it's Kelly Oubre. It doesn't matter if it's Campaign or if it's Nick Batum or, it doesn't matter to me who it is. But you're going to have to get contributions from guys outside of those two. You're going to need to rebound like you rebounded in Game 2. You're going to need to keep them off the glass and keep them. They've done a really great job. They kind of in Game 3, they let Jalen Brunson kind of get his, and they basically shut down everybody else. I think you're going to see more of that. But Tobias, the friendly ghost, good Lord, has been like almost transparent in this playoff run, right? Just in the last 3 games has scored 21 points like, you can't have that. You can't have that kind of production, from a guy that is supposed to be, quote unquote, your third scorer.
Yeah. That's been really the life of his contract, right? I mean, we have felt that way. That the Tobias seems like a great guy and enjoyed his time here and things like that. But when you look at the contract versus the production, it's never lived up to what we needed. It would be artful, life imitating art imitating life.
Seriously.
For his time in Philadelphia to end as like that.
Seriously.
But I mean, I agree with all that. The Sixers, and that was something that I think before we jump out, was something that I think is really interesting that you'd brought up there about really the job on Brunson in this series, where they kind of cap him in Game 1 and Game 2, but McBride goes crazy. DiVincenzo hits some tough shots. Josh Hart can't miss all of a sudden. It's like, I understand, wanting to put a lid on that and put a lid on Brunson, but it was like, it wasn't yielding wins. And then he gets a little bit free in Game 3, but you're able to kind of shut down other guys and you win that game. So it's an interesting kind of like, it's an interesting balance, and we'll have to watch and see how Nick Nurse handles this the rest of this series. Because even though Brunson's he's getting his, and he's perfected this, getting by a defender and stopping short and drawing the contact. As good as any guard, I think, in the league. Especially for a guy that's undersized, as he is. And so that's an interesting part of it that, we'll have to look at throughout the duration of this series, and, who gets free when, and where the
Right.
Sixers defensive, their defensive awareness is more clued into. And because we've seen it work and not work in both ways through the first 3 games. So
Yeah. Listen, we'll see how tomorrow plays out, but whatever happens, we'll be back talking all things Sixers on the next show, and hopefully we're talking about the round 2 matchup against whoever survives. Look forward to talking about that. But on the other end of this, we'll be putting a bow on the Flyer season, and kind of looking ahead to see what's going on with the NHL playoffs, and what's in the future for the Flyers. So on that note, we'll be back in a little bit.
Iverson, wow, what a fake off Daniels as he broke his ankles and got all the way to the cup.
Von C. Brewing Company is a 20-barrel, 16,000 square foot microbrewery with a 2,500 square foot tasting room, including a spacious outside beer garden in Norristown, PA, in the heart of Montgomery County. The Von C. family is part of the family that started C. Schmidt and Son Brewing in 1860. Stop in Wednesday through Sunday and taste a variety of draft and 16-ounce cans of originally brewed beer, and tell them the Drunk on Broad crew sent you. Von C. Brewing is located at 1210 Stenbridge Street, Suite 300 in Norristown. Cheers.
Team Clicks are the only glasses for real sports fans. With interchangeable arms, you can support all of your favorite teams, or even make and create custom options as well. These die-hard sports fans have realized that sports fans needed something other than face paint to show their love and passion for their teams. Go to teamclicks.com/DOB and show your love for your hometown team.
La Torrens curated collection of men's and women's watches is a perfect investment that lasts for years to come and fits perfectly with your every outfit and style. Our range of classic watches aren't just a great perfect formal and casual accessory, but a time machine that takes you back to memories. Explore our collection of timeless watches that can reflect your taste, personality, and personal style. Our exclusive collection of carefully curated, affordable luxury watches is what you need to make a personalized style statement. You can take pride in your prized possession, handing it over to the next generations as your most loved asset that they can also own and display with the same pride. These high-quality pieces stand the test of time, giving exceptional value and return on your investment. Go to la-touring.com and use code DOB at checkout and get 10% off.
If you're looking for unique sports apparel, check out Streaker Sports. They've dug deep into the archives and have brought back some incredible defunct team logos, and have even created entire defunct league collections. They also have collections paying homage to sports culture, including the Miracle on Ice, Slap Shot, Caddyshack, the Mighty Ducks, and even have a license with Wiffle Ball and USA Hockey. Only for Drunk on Broad listeners, use code BROAD at checkout to get 10% off anything at streakersports.com. Again, that's 10% off anything at streakersports.com with discount code BROAD.
All right, well, we're back talking all things Flyers on Drunk on the Ice on episode 198. Mark, we're going to try to put a bow on this as much as we possibly can. The season kind of ended the way that it was going to play out. I know the chances for them to be able to make the playoffs are, you know, looking at the ability to be able to get to the playoffs was a really, really slim margin. But I wouldn't say that this season was unsuccessful either.
No, I've kind of I've kind of kicked around the verbiage a little bit, like about, I saw a lot of people online considering it a successful season, and that's certainly their prerogative. I kind of stopped short of successful. I don't really know what word to use to describe it. Simply by the fact that, you're in a playoff spot for as long as you were. And, at that point, it's a disappointment to not make it. And
True.
then, the games matter, right? Like how you win and lose matters.
Mhm.
And to drop the games that they did against the quality of competition that they did was frustrating. But there were also a lot of there was real growth there too at the same time.
Absolutely.
So it was like very, very difficult for me to like find the word to describe how I would consider this year. I think when I step away from it, I just think of it as just like this was a progress year in a rebuild. I think that's, where I try
think
to encapsulate it all.
I don't know. I'm agreeing with you, Mark. I don't know what the word is. Anytime that you fall short of where you think you could have been,
Mhm.
I think it would be not appropriate to say it was a successful season. But I think it played out a lot better than we thought it would.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
to me, it leaves me with a very optimistic perspective for next year. So I think that's kind of where I'm settling. Is
Right.
like it's better than I thought we would be. It gave me some light it gave me a lot of vision for what this team could be down the line. And I think the thing that's great is that there's a lot of guys on this roster that they're not tied into long term, right? So there's a lot of roster flexibility there to be able to say, all right, we saw some stuff that we like from some of these guys, some of these other guys. Maybe we have because of the contracts, we have the opportunity to potentially move on from them.
Mhm.
But all things considered, it's better than where I thought we would be
Sure.
this time. Listen, we're better than where we were this time last year.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's
So
totally
if you
fair.
want to say success, great. If you don't want to, also great. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter because you're looking at the opportunity to keep this progression moving
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's, I agree with that. I think like it's kind of, you know, I don't know where. Yeah, I'm still not quite sure where this offseason leads the Flyers. I can see a scenario where they're a little bit more aggressive in trying to like shore up some of their needs. But I also can see where, maybe they're prioritizing internal development and
Right.
some of the guys that are already here. That was, I think, a big, big factor this season in things that we were excited about. Was that like it was the Tyson Forresters, it was the Joel Farabee, the Morgan Frost turned in a nice year, especially in the second half. It was a lot of the young guys. Cam York, played excellent on the back end for the Flyers, much like a top pair defenseman. And but at the same time too, it was like, and it would never be like, it's just never just a Flyer season without there just being unprecedented like drama for a team that, in their situation, you would think, oh, maybe there wouldn't be as much. But of course, like top prospect decides he doesn't want to play for them. The Carter Hart news comes down. Like there's all this stuff.
A lot of twists and turns that we did not anticipate.
Yeah. I mean,
Truly.
So, that was, and that I think that's a testament to the job Briere did. Bring really kind of
Absolutely.
self. Well, I've kind of with caution, of course, but I've moved forward here, by each passing um, pie coming at him,
Yeah,
he
seriously.
of maneuvering around a lot of them, and you know, so I think I've come away happy with his I feel like he's the guy for the job. I feel a lot better about him being the guy
Yeah.
for. So I mean, we'll see how that plays out in the summer, but
Yeah.
it was an interesting year. I mean, like there was a lot of stuff that happened, and a playoff berth would have been amazing, but
Yeah. I mean, I think I think what a lot of people got enamored with, rightfully so, is the excitement of what this city is like during a Flyers playoff run.
yeah,
And it spoke more to me, spoke more to the desire to get back to that point
right,
and to have a taste of that, even if you were going to be wildly outmatched in that first round, just to have that player experience. And I think the way that the season played out
yeah,
with that epic collapse at the end of the season, where you lose that stretch of what was it, eight straight,
yeah, H Street,
that if you had even just gone 50-50 in that
right,
and split those 8 games, you would have been in the playoffs and you would have had that opportunity. So I think there was a lot of disappointment in terms of that, not that the way that it played out.
mhm,
But to me, right, there are a lot of bright lights that you did get to glean out of the way that this season played out, right?
yeah,
You
absolutely,
saw a lot of leadership from a guy like Konechny,
mhm,
right? You saw a lot of production from a guy like Owen Tippett, from Joel Farabee, from Sanheim. You saw those guys be productive in this system. But you talk about some of the young guys, right? You talk about the production that you got from Tyson Forrester. You talk about Cam York. You talk about guys that you were able to get really good production from, and really
yeah,
good on ice production, and not just like from a statistical point of view, but like I got my eyeballs on the game. I'm seeing progression and I'm seeing better play on the ice.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that was a really calling card for this group this year when they were having success. I mean, was like the structure they played with and things
Mhm.
like that, and that's a John Tortorella thing. That's something that defense for first, heavy game, good on the along the walls, things like that. But when you talk about like that slide too, and another thing, I mean, like that was one of the things that had happened throughout the year that could have also, even if it was just, you know, if it wasn't literally the worst in the league. I mean, the power play was a
Well,
big issue for this group this year. They had the worst power play in the game this season, and you can play with lots of structure, and and all those things are good. I'm not,
mhm.
you can really be a sum of your parts and be a tough out for teams, but at some point, you have to score goals, and the man advantage was a real big issue for this team this year. So I wonder if they address that, as Book
Yeah.
says here, like about getting some scorers in here, and maybe that offensive defenseman will be Jamie Drysdale. And
Yeah, you think maybe that, right? You get a full off season with him in the building.
yeah,
You get you get to have another off. You get to have your first off season with him in that off season program, and maybe that leads to maybe a little bit more direction on the back line
hmm,
for this team during opportunities like power plays. Where, I mean, to say they struggled was an understatement. It was like epically bad. It was almost like you didn't want the power play because of how bad it was.
yeah,
They had it seemingly, right. I'm not. It seemed to be that they were more productive when they were short or down a guy than when they were up a guy. Like
yeah,
it made it. Nothing made sense in terms of the way that played out, right? But
yeah,
you look at the elite scorer. Joe, that to me is where every team is chasing that guy. Every team is trying to find, the Austin Matthews, the Connor McDavid. They're all the Connor Bedard. They're all trying to chase that guy. So where they're going to be picking in these drafts, right, in that mid to late first round. Because if this team is going to be where we think it might be, you're either going to have to steal that guy away from another team and epically, pay it on a contract level.
Yeah.
Or you're going to have to mine a guy, and I'm trying to think of a guy. Can you think of a guy that like fits that role, but like was drafted in the mid-20s? Is there a guy in Boston? Was Marchand?
Well, Pasternak was a second-round pick, I believe.
Okay, maybe that's the guy I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I think
but you're going to have to mine a guy like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it obviously the odds are a little bit, they're, not a little bit, but they are lower, to find that player.
Yeah.
And, drafting is, and like we're seeing it right now, right? Like, I mean, the Eagles are in the middle of the NFL draft and all. Drafting is an art. I mean, it takes it is far and away not an exact science, right? Like, I mean, player development, there's peaks and there's valleys and there's, and when you put in that developmental work too with a player, like I look at their situation with like a player like Konechny and things like that. And the player he's kind of evolved into. And I can see the reluctance, on the Flyers' part. He's due a contract in a year. And the number may be for a rebuilding team a little bit more exorbitant, a bigger deal than maybe you're comfortable giving him at this point. Yeah. But it's hard. And ironically, I mean, like, as you just mentioned, Don, that, Konechny was a late 20s pick, I believe. He was a pick in the 20s. So, I mean, he's turned into a good player, but do you really feel comfortable giving him that money at this point? And then if you're not, what happens there? So it's kind of, it's a tough spot to be in. But like when you look at the power play, overtime, 3-on-3 overtime as well, that's really where that lack of talent kind of shines, where like the Flyers are by no means, and I think they proved that this season, is that they're not a team completely devoid of talent. There is some players that can do some things. You would think that like a player like Morgan Frost with his vision and creativity with the puck, that he'd be better on the power play. So I would have thought, and they didn't say, I believe in the exit interviews, it sounds like Rocky Thompson, who runs the power play, he'll be back next year. I wonder, if that was the right decision. I don't know if it's all execution and maybe it's some coaching. Rocky seems like a smart guy. He's very insightful when he has the opportunities to speak, but I don't, maybe I would have looked for a change there just to change it.
I think if there's ever a place to change, that to me would be the blinking siren light to say like, hey, we might want to address this issue.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that like change for sake of change. I'm saying it would be absolutely justified if you were like, I think we're going to make a move at that spot.
Yeah, we're going to.
Maybe we might go in a different direction. Maybe we'll try something new. I don't know, because to say, like I said before, to say it was bad was a wild understatement.
Yeah.
It looks like you saw the news come down just after the season ended with the news with Fedotov that he's got the extension, so he's going to be around with the team again. A guy that's going to have a whole off season to be able to train with the team. Didn't light the world on fire in the 3 games that he played, but also, was, I think, what you might want to see out of a guy that's going to play essentially a backup role. Because it seems to me like that position would be one that they probably won't touch this offseason. No. They're probably going to go into the season with Arison and Fedotov and, look to kind of grow that pair.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how the roster construction plays out. There's plenty of time to talk about give me something to glean on free agency and then something to look forward to the draft.
Okay. Yeah, I think, to touch on the goaltending, I think I don't know that the Flyers could have put two guys in a worse position. Like just with even if it was inadvertent, with the heart
Mhm.
stuff or whatever. I mean, they ran Urson hard. And, he was a kid that I think um, he was scheduled or something like that to play 20 games this year, apparently, is what they were thinking. And he played way more than that.
51.
51. That's a
51.
That's a regular starter's workload, I
Mhm.
think, in the NHL today. And that's a
Now,
lot of
listen,
games.
in those 51 games, right? The goals against is 2.8, which
Yeah.
is great, right? The save percentage is right 80, 89. So it's
Yeah.
not great, but for all things considered, considering like you were saying, the role that he was supposed to come in to do last
Yeah.
last season,
Sure.
and the
Yeah.
role that he ends up playing,
Yeah.
I would consider that I feel confident that you could see a progression of more of that in a more balanced role,
Yeah.
that he would have some more success.
Yeah. Yeah. I can certainly see that. Um, and, that'll be their plan, for next year. And I'll be looking forward to, because I like both guys. I do like Fedotov and I like Sam Ersson. And, so they'll be in tandem more than likely than not. They don't take up a large chunk of the cap, I believe, either. So
Right.
you're doing it at a cost efficient way with they're being upside there. So
Mhm.
I'm excited about that. But I think to go back to the question, I think for free agency and stuff, you'll kind of see the Flyers a little bit more. It'll probably mirror, I think, what we saw them do last year.
Okay.
Guys like Ryan Paling, Garnet Hathaway, who I thought, turned out to be a really nice signing for them. In that bottom six role, energy, forward type. Really also if you ever hear him speak post game, he's incredibly well spoken and a good guy.
Mhm.
And he plays like a maniac on it. And it's fun. He seems like a really good guy and, a good asset to this, team looking to establish an identity and things like that.
Yeah.
So I can understand them, wanting to have a guy like that around. And so, yeah, I think I think they'll be looking at that, kind of that look that, how would I put it? Uh, a low risk, potential high reward addition. You'll be looking at kind of some guys, that maybe had trouble sticking other places and, but may have some
Right.
talent that, in a good situation. Because the Flyers have roster spots, I think, to give guys to compete for. So I could see that
Look,
kind of being what they do in free agency.
it seems to fit the stage that they're in right now. Right.
Right.
They're in that transition between trying to get better, but not ready to go all in.
Yeah.
So a lot of the guys that seem to fit that role, right? You're not talking about, being interested in the guys that are going to be at the top of this free agent class. You're not talking about guys like Reinhart and Gensel and Kane and Stamkos,
Right.
right? But you're talking about guys that could potentially be on that next tier, right? That are not the elite of the elite, but guys that could elevate the play of the guys on this roster
Mhm.
and, maybe push them over that line where they're not going to have that 8-game skid at the end of the season that, essentially derails the season into, what people are deeming not a success.
Yeah. Yeah.
As far as the draft, obviously we're not talking the NHL draft is not a draft where you see guys that get drafted and immediately go to the right on to the roster. It's very rare that happens. Normally the guys that are happening, right, are the elite of the elite that are even at the top of the draft class, sometimes those guys aren't even coming over.
Yeah.
What's the approach from this team going into the draft?
Yeah, I think like as we were saying about like the playoffs and stuff, one caveat to this, I think, is that a lot of people consider this year's draft, from everything that I've gathered, people see it as like a 12-player draft.
Okay.
As I've like read and have done research and little bit of video watching and stuff like that, I really kind of view it as like more of a 15-player draft. So for the
Okay.
Flyers to pick 12 isn't the worst thing. The way that it could play out this year, I would imagine that they would prioritize, take big swings at skill again, skill
Okay.
players. One of the names that are kind of being bandied about this year was like, if you go all the way back to the beginning of the season, and it was a lot of people looked at Macklin Celebrini, who's likely to be the first overall pick in the draft this year. But one of the players that were right behind him in terms of skill and things like that was Cole Iserman. And he's kind of sliding down draft boards and a lot of people's mock drafts and things like that. And he could be a name that ends up falling to the Flyers at 12.
Yeah. On the NHL rank, right? The ranking of draft prospects on the NHL website has him, not drafted, but has him ranked as the 12th best player. And I think the thing that I look at with him is the success of guys that have come out of the USA development program.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
that has been a really impressive thing to see, that domestically, that the game, not only is the game growing in the US, but they're developing into these top elite players. Because if when I look at some of the guys, right, you've got guys, the Celebrini at the top of this draft, right, is kind of like lights above anybody else.
Right.
But I look at where we're looking at, and to me, the pool of talent right in that middle is going to be one that I think, if you look at the approach that you're talking about, and you look at, just give me at that stage, there's really, unless there's a guy that you are like absolutely in love with, you stay where you are.
Right.
And you just take the best, the guy that you believe has the best skill level available.
Right.
And you just, you add them to your farm system. You let them develop, whether that's internationally, whether that's domestically, whatever it is. And I think you continue to just kind of build assets within your farm system. Because, you're talking what? 8, you're talking 3, 4, 5 years down the line that they could potentially contribute.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it would actually be kind of interesting if the Flyers would have a player like Cole Iserman fall to them at 12, considering last year they picked 7th and Matev Michkov fell to them. And, and those are the kind of draft day things that happen that can kind of like really accelerate a rebuild, where you look back on it and you're like, man, how'd that guy fall that far? And it would be nice for the Flyers to end up on the good end of that. I think at times we've seen we feel like we've passed on guys like that, and have seen them go on the greater heights in their careers. So I that's kind of where I'm at with the draft. I think like that the Flyers will be looking at skill. Skill will be at the top of their checklist there. Cole Iserman does fill a need for them. The Flyers have needs at center, both on the pro team and in the organization. They have their left wing depth is kind of thin. The one place they are actually pretty strong is on the right side. They have a lot of natural right wingers on their team, and so yeah, I think that's where they'll be. For the draft here, and 12 is not a bad place to be. I think in this draft with some of the
it's a good sweet spot.
Yeah.
The talent pool at that pick should be enough that they should be able to get a guy that they really like and a
Yeah.
guy that they can bring into the system.
Yeah.
And again, we're not talking about, contributing sooner than later, right? We're talking about contributing, 4 or 5 years down the line, which could mean that you're contributing as a trade asset
Sure.
more than you're contributing on the ice. It could be, you're developing guys so that they're part of a trade package to bring in a guy that puts you over the top for a playoff run.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
And speaking of playoffs, what has impressed you in terms of the playoffs? I know that there's a lot going on, but anything jump off the board with you on either side, East or West, that is kind of, for this in this playoff run?
Yeah, I think, looking at just the teams that made it in all this year, I've been really impressed, mostly, I guess, with the Flyers being in the Metro Division and stuff. I've been watching the Rangers and the Capital series a bit, and the Rangers are I think for real. As far as coached by former Flyers head coach Peter Laviolette, and they play that Laviolette style.
It's true,
and they're fun. They're a fun team to watch as like a hockey fan, I think. And they're taking care of business against a Washington team that I think a lot of people were even surprised were there. I've been impressed with that. I mean, like Connor McDavid's always a fun watch if you're up late and want to catch those Coast games. They're in a series right now with LA that's been, he's a fun player to watch and stuff, and so that's always a lot of fun. I've been interested because I think they're really, really. I think Dallas is kind of the team to watch here for a potential cup run. I think the Stars they got a real good group, really good group. And, I like what I've seen from them so far in their series. So there's been, I think for a lot of people have felt kind of like the playoffs have kind of been missing something this year. But, the first round's always the most fun round, I think, because it is. Lots of games.
This round seems like, and the fact that the NBA playoffs are going on at the same time.
Yep.
There's just a lot of content. There's a lot of games. There's multiple games every day, every night. The team that seems to kind of always have the goal scoring in place, right, is Edmonton. I saw a stat on SportsCenter this morning talking about the offensive production over the course of the last couple playoff runs, and Edmonton's got 4 guys at the top of that list. Yeah. They've been, the game last night where they've put up, the game 1 they put up 7, game 3 they put up 6. To see their offensive production, right? To see the production from Draisaitl and from McDavid and getting contributions from guys up and down their roster. It's a team that at some point I wouldn't mind seeing them go on like a long playoff run just to see them on a more elevated platform. Because I think that would be great for the game.
Yeah.
Like to see those guys in a Western Conference final, in a Stanley Cup, like the matchup that I'm kind of looking at is like, if you can get an Edmonton, Colorado, Edmonton, Vancouver, or Edmonton, Vegas, like Western Conference final, that to me would be a really good, like 7-game back and forth, really, really competitive series. I also think it could be really offensively productive too.
Yeah.
You'd see, a lot of like 7-5 games, 5-4, a lot of goal scoring on the Eastern Conference side. Right. You've got opportunities. Boston seems to be a team that, Toronto's given them a run for their money.
Yeah.
Austin Matthews is another guy that is just a fun guy to watch. But Toronto seems to be constantly snake bit with whenever they try to go on a playoff run. Carolina's taking care of business. As much fun as that series has been with the Islanders, they're they're up 3-0 with going into today. They're going to take that series probably. And you got Florida. Florida's playing really well. They're up 3-0 against Tampa. I'm not sure who I and then you got the Rangers up 3-0 as well. I don't like, to me in the East, it's kind of like I'm curious to see how the second round matchups play out, right?
Yeah.
In that potentially Florida and Boston, and then most likely the Rangers and Carolina. That series will be really good too. To me on the Eastern Conference side, it's kind of like a toss up. It could be Carolina, it could be the Rangers, it could be Boston, it could be Florida, it could be any one of those 4 teams.
Yeah.
But if there's anything to say about the NHL, right, the further along you get in the playoffs,
Right.
the more elevated the play is, the more fun it is to watch. So,
Yeah.
Curious to see how this playoff run plays out, and to see where it ends up, because the Stanley Cup Finals into the when this stuff starts to run into the summer, it's a good thing to throw on on a late night.
Yeah, it is. It's still like, I think it's some of the most exciting stuff in all of sports. It's like, it kind of has like the NHL playoffs, I think, has a lot of that March Madness thing about it, where it's the tournament starts and you're like, man, anybody can take this. It really, like, I was sitting here just a moment ago talking about Dallas. They're down 2-0 to Vegas in their series, and it's still kind of like that could still very well go 7. You know what I mean? Like, that could go
absolutely.
7 games. The Stars have the kind of talent that they could get back in that series pretty easily. Sometimes it's, things happen in the course of a series, a big hit, something drags everybody into the fight, and it becomes this galvanizing thing. It happens more in the NHL playoffs, I think, than it does in any other sport. And
most definitely,
it's always a fun. It's fun. It's my favorite time of the hockey season is this time right now, the May, like, beginning of the playoffs kind of thing is always the best time. So, we'll see. Hopefully hopefully the matchups are better, in round 2, like we see more top teams playing top teams,
Most definitely. Well, listen, we'll be back on another episode a little later on this, in a couple of weeks to, take a look at where this, where the NHL playoffs are, maybe a little bit more draft conversation. Mark, anything you want to share with the people on their way out? Any of I know you got some union coverage, coming down the pike. You got some good stuff going on.
Yeah, I do. There's a new episode of Water Cooler Talk, a Flyers podcast, more on the Flyers, with Siobhan Nolan from the Hockey News. She came on as a guest recently. We recapped the season over there as well. You can check that out. We're going to be down. I'm going to be down at the Subaru Park tonight to cover the Union on the pitch against Real Salt Lake. And for Sunday and the Monday, we'll have the Ramos Roundup again, kind of recapping all of things going on, NFL draft, Sixers playoffs, regardless, see what happens tomorrow with that and that game 4. So, that's all I have going on, and you can check it all out at firedupsports.com.
Sounds good. All right, brother. Take care. Go Flyers.
All right.